happy to have John Machniak back here with us. John's been with us before, giving well-received presentations on such things as the magic of the mind, as well as being a guest magician at various puppet shows. He's known for his informative and entertaining style, and audiences appreciate his wit, humor, and intelligence. We're pleased to welcome him back for an exploration of the psychology of Halloween. So please give it up for John Machniak.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know. I hope I look Halloweenish enough. You can't be more traditional than Snoopy. Now, I was going to wear my Halloween costume. I was debating coming as a Speedo swimmer model, but I didn't want to distract people, so I opted for, a little modesty. Thank you, Jason. As Jason said, I have done other presentations here before. Today we're going to be talking about Halloween. And a little bit background about myself. I've been a magician since I'm 7 years old, so I've always been fascinated by mystery and fascinated by strange and unusual things. I'm also a licensed professional counselor and a self-admitted academic nerd. Now, when I say academic nerd, don't think of Poindexter with the horn-rimmed glasses taped together, because I'm not that kind of nerd. When I say an academic nerd, I mean using my ability to look at different articles on psychology, and especially about the psychology of Halloween, and to break it down into some fascinating stuff. I did this presentation yesterday at Caroline Kennedy Library for those watching on cable, which is in North Dearborn Heights. It was incredibly, incredibly well received, which I'm really honored. I was very honored and humbled by it. So I hope you also feel that way. Now, I've combined my interest and my skills to bring you what I hope is a fascinating look at the psychology of Halloween, the economics of Halloween, the history of Halloween, and how it's changed through history. We'll also discuss vampires, werewolves, and witches. Now, I discovered very interesting things, and I'll give you a little teaser of things to come during my research. I found out, for example, that in 2024, Americans were expected to spend $3.8 billion on candy for Halloween. I learned how 9/11 changed the way that we look at Halloween. I learned that vampire cults not only are very real, but that vampires walk amongst us. I learned that at one time, some people accused of being werewolves were condemned to death. And I also learned that no person accused of being a witch was ever burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. And I also learned finally why some male witches despise being called warlocks. So we're going to talk about this and some other fascinating topics. And I think a good way to start is by looking at the economics of Halloween, because the economics is a huge, huge part of Halloween. And then we're going to get into something about the history and some other things. I decided to compare Halloween between the years 2016 and 2024. That's an eight-year comparison. And I thought that would give us an idea on how much it's changed since 2016. And the information I'm going through, and there's a little statistics, it's a little heavy, but this is the only real heavy part. This is from the National Retail Federation. Annual survey based on 2016 projections. Total spending for Halloween was expected to reach $8.4 billion, which was an all-time high in 2016. In 2024, it was $11.6 billion. Some comparisons. How was the money spent? Well, $3.1 billion was on costumes in 2016. 2024, $3.8 billion. $2.5 billion in candy, 2016. $3.5 billion in 2024. $2.4 billion on decorations, 2016. $3.8 billion, 2024. $390 million on greeting cards in 2016. $500 million in 2024, which is interesting. I've never sent a Halloween greeting card, and I've certainly never gotten one, but someone's spending $500 million every year in our economy to buy greeting cards. I also found in 2024, in the 25 to 34 age group, 56% of shoppers started shopping before October, which is interesting since a lot of people don't shop for Christmas until Christmas Eve. So a big part of the economics of Halloween, and that's part of it, we're going to get into some more, but horror films. Where would Halloween be without horror films? They're a big money maker. Now, There's been research on, believe it or not, there's research on our favorite monsters and their psychological appeal and why they appeal to us. I found out that younger people were more likely to prefer recent and more violent and murderous slasher movies and to like them for their killing prowess. Older people were more attracted to early vintage non-slasher monsters like Karloff's Frankenstein. Overall, monsters were particularly liked for their intelligence, their superhuman powers, and their ability to safely show the dark side of human nature. So do horror films help people master terror, or do they shape terror? There's a body of literature that studies a phenomenon known as cinematic neurosis. That's the development of anxiety and other symptoms after watching a film. Of course, nothing happens in a vacuum. Individuals who may have had these problems before find them exacerbated by watching horror movies. I remember back in the day when I was but a child, The Exorcist. The Exorcist came out, and there was a lot of people suffering some very emotional distress. And people today still do that. Now, interestingly, I came across research that suggested that the slasher genre rose in popularity as the American economy spiraled more into a recession. Researchers in the article suggested that slasher films symbolize the sort of cathartic release for the mainly adolescent audience at a time in their lives when impending adulthood and an unfavorable economic climate seemed to conspire against them. Now, a big theme throughout this whole presentation is how culture influences Halloween. And Halloween also influences the culture, but this is a great example, and we're going to come back to this when I talk about female costumes. We're going to talk about women in slasher films. There's been research on that too. The results of one study showed that sexual female characters were less likely to survive and had a significantly longer death scene compared to those female characters who didn't engage in sexual behaviors. There's a concept called the final girl, in which the female character, who by virtue of her pure and virginal attributes is able to survive and conquer the film's central antagonist. Female characters who were not involved in sexual activity were depicted more positively than female characters who did engage in sexual activity. These differences were not observed for male characters. Music in Halloween is another big one. You don't think about it, but it is. Another commercial Halloween theme to consider is music. There's a US heavy metal band with its roots actually in Detroit called Halloween, and there's a German power metal band called Helloween, and they've sold more than 15 million records worldwide since their creation. What would an academic nerd be without looking at the psychology of pumpkins? Well, unemployment, I found, doesn't seem to turn people away from Halloween. It's possible, according to research, that the holiday might help frustrated, unemployed people to vent their feelings and obtain the feeling of happiness using shopping therapy, including shopping for pumpkins. One study concluded that negative economic factors do not seem to matter much and might not influence the volume of Halloween pumpkin spending. So it is wonderful the researchers are doing constructive research on pumpkins. Now, that's the economic part, but there's also a huge history of Halloween, and I was surprised as I was doing my research how little A, I didn't know, and how B, what I thought I knew was absolutely 100% wrong. Okay, Halloween, how did Halloween begin? Halloween began as a Celtic pagan celebration in what is now Ireland and the UK. It was brought to the United States by Irish immigrants in the 1850s. It started as a collective ritual celebrating harvest and became a religious day to commemorate the lives of Catholic saints. All Saints' Day is November 1st. In Mexico, All Souls' Day, November 2nd, and All Saints' Day, November 1st, is called the Day of the Dead. This is a bigger celebration in Mexico than Halloween, largely because of their very Catholic population. And even in America or wherever someone is Catholic, All Saints' Day is considered a holy day of obligation, just like Sunday, just like Christmas, Easter. So it is considered a major holiday in which we reflect on and pray for the souls of the folks who went before. The 1920s. In the 1920s, commercial and media influences exerted a strong presence with newspapers and magazines. Catalogs devoted sections to the holiday. Advertisements offered Halloween-themed products. The culture of the Roaring '20s encouraged forms of celebration including wild revelry, especially among the young. And a growing fear, and this is fascinating, in years leading up to the Great Depression and during the Great Depression, were intensifying cases of vandalism, arson, violence, and shooting, which is very common in urban areas. We're going to talk about Devil's Night in a second. In the 1930s, a transition began to occur characterized by safety concerns. The holiday was nearly canceled as a holiday because vandals and pranksters were causing millions of dollars in damage across the United States. Devil's Night. How did Devil's Night start? This surprised me as well. It stems from the European tradition of a mischief night and can be traced back to Britain, where it's a reference to the day before May Day, a celebration for the return of spring. Mischief Night made its way into the U.S. during the 1930s and 1940s, when cities started experiencing a higher number of pranks and vandalism on October 30th. Some historians suggest that the mischief might be related to Black Tuesday, which was October 29, 1929, when the stock market crashed, causing the Great Depression. Tensions of war, poverty could have caused an escalation in the number of incidents of people acting out on their frustrations. Holidays always continue to evolve throughout the coming year. This holiday is no exception. The holiday was an attempt by Americans to shape our identity through practices and products of holiday celebration. During this time, women of the new middle class with financial means and leisure time to appear cultured were influential in shaping the meaning of Halloween. Middle to upper class white women seized upon the Halloween in its attraction and its romantic old world history with the British Isles. Halloween and culture. As I mentioned, Halloween mirrors the constant process of identity formation, and holidays like Halloween continue to thrive as long as celebrants have needs which ritual addresses. Excuse me. Now, an example of a cultural shift, again, it's a huge theme of this presentation, was what happened with Halloween after 9/11, a tragic day that we all remember. Since the holiday is influenced by culture, it also was very much influenced by 9/11. After 9/11, obviously, which was in September 2001, the Halloween became more of a holiday that the adults appropriated, promoting a more pared-down version to counteract the fear. After 9/11, themes of death and evil took on prominent, troublesome meanings to adults, and it no longer seemed appropriate to scare young people. Intense, unstructured, spooky dramas were less attractive to a lot of adults for family outings because fear was already close at hand. After 9/11, adults expressed the goal of containing and limiting emotionally jarring fears. And they did this as much for themselves as they did for their children. And I was reminded by somebody who very much remembers 9/11, that costumes for the children after Halloween were all very positive in the sense that they were police, they were firefighters, they were doctors, they were first responders, which was, again, a great example of the culture influencing the holiday. Trends. How is Halloween different between the generations? We have younger people and we have older people in this audience. Well, it's changed. As I mentioned, early Halloween shopping is dominated by the 25 to 34 age group. 56% of shoppers shop before October. They shop early because they love the holiday. Half of the segment in 2024 said they plan to shop early because Halloween is their favorite holiday. That's half of them. Think about that. Half of the segment, they thought it was their favorite holiday. Possible influences and increased interest in the holiday include things like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. They provide costume ideas, competition to be unique. In 2024, 72% of consumers plan to celebrate Halloween. Top activities included handing out candy, decorating their home or yard, dressing up pumpkins, or dressing in costume, dressing up as pumpkins too, carving a pumpkin, throwing a party. Now, how did trick or treat get started? It seems like such a really cool recent idea. This also was one of the great things I found that I absolutely did not know. How did trick or treat start? It started because in Scotland and Ireland, they had a tradition of folks going house to house, putting on a small performance and being rewarded with food or treats. The tradition goes back to at least as far as, anyone want to guess a century? Don't be shy. It goes back to at least the 16th century. The 16th century, as does wearing costumes on Halloween. In North America, interestingly enough, the earliest occurrence is from 1898 in British Columbia. In fact, the expression trick or treat most likely was first recorded in Ontario in 1917. The activity is very prevalent in the UK, Ireland, the US, Canada, and Mexico. Now, again, culture is influencing Halloween when it comes to things like the green influence. Some of the ways it's influenced Halloween is that more and more folks are looking for healthier treats to give out, including non-candy alternatives. There's an emphasis on selecting organic and locally produced items with minimal packaging. Alternatives to trick-or-treating, such as the UNICEF coin collection program. People are hosting neighborhood parties and choosing decorations that use natural products to help eliminate waste. Many churches and other organizations also offer such things as trunk or treat events. The sale of decorations specifically made for these events has become big business, and I did not know this. So, and it can include such things as inflatable monsters. If someone went, I printed something offline or online, and you can all have a copy of it. This is how big it's become. If you wouldn't mind passing these things, thank you, young lady. Just pass them out. Look at you. You're more than welcome. Take all these. I got a couple more handouts. This is so cool. This is huge business. I don't know an exact economic figure, but the fact that they can make enough decorations just for trunk or treat, that tells you how huge it is. It's fascinating. You can look at that now or take it home and read it. I think you'd find it's very, very interesting, and it's very revealing. And we're going to talk a bit about why trunk or treating is considered is becoming more and more popular. We'll get back to that. There's also something that's called the Teal Pumpkin Project. That's something that's promoted by the Food Allergy Research and Education Organization. If you see someone who has a teal pumpkin in front of their home, it indicates they have non-food items available for trick-or-treaters. Their motto is, help create a safer, happier Halloween for all. I came across a study done on children between the ages of 3 and 14 that was published in the Journal of Nutrition, Education, and Behavior, and it suggested that nutrition professionals should encourage adults to create holiday examples that do not rely on unhealthful foods. And they found that between the ages of 3 and 14, researchers found that children were just as likely to choose a toy as candy for Halloween. Now, examples of non-food items that can be given out to folks, to children, include things like glow sticks, bracelets, necklaces, glow-in-the-dark items, pencils, erasers, bouncy balls, stickers, crazy straws.
Toothbrushes?
Pardon me?
Toothbrushes?
Toothbrushes is fine. And you're reading my mind, because the next thing, this is interesting, I did not know this. Many doctors and dentist offices offer a buyback program of children's candy. The child receives money, and the candy is sent to soldiers overseas. I have a friend whose son is in the military, and I told him, he's like, yeah, my son gets candy every year. So how cool is that? It's an example of a creative solution. You're not robbing the child of the fun of going around doing that, because they're still going to get something. So I thought that was a really cool thing. Now, I mentioned trunk or treat. One of the concerns, I think, that trunk or treat has become more and more popular is because of concerns about child safety. So what about Halloween and child safety? Is that true, or is it an urban legend? Well, concerns about safety seem to be much more of an urban legend, according to the research. For example, there's a widespread belief that there are anonymous sadists giving children dangerous treats at Halloween, and a review of news stories from Halloween from 1958 to 1983 suggests that the threat has been greatly exaggerated. The idea is viewed as an urban legend that probably emerged during the 1970s. Now, why might that be? Well, possibly because the idea gives an expression to growing fears about safety of children. Remember, kids on milk cartons and on, and the danger of crimes and other sources of social strain. Urban legends, of course, are responses to the social strain, and they're shaped by the perception of the threat that something is a threat to the social organization. And children repeat stories I know I did as a kid. And especially older children trying to scare younger children, and it takes on a life of its own. I have a friend whose wife also grew up, where this is being filmed in Dearborn Heights, for those of you watching outside the area, Dearborn Heights in Michigan. I have a friend whose wife also grew up in Dearborn Heights, and she swears she saw, there was a kid, she knew a neighbor, and he had an apple, and he'd been into it, and there was a razor blade. And I said, really? I said, well, then did it make the news? Well, no, I didn't see it. Well, did it make the Dearborn Heights Leader, our major paper? Well, no. Now, come on. Stuff like that is going to be front page. It's not going to be front page news only in Dearborn Heights. It's going to be front page news all over the world. Interestingly enough, I did come across a few cases of children who did have tainted candies. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, one of the children had a tainted candy because his father tried to poison him because he was estranged from the mom. They were divorced, and so he figured, oh, Halloween. So fortunately, thanks to fine police work, they said, no. So that was the only one, and I looked through FBI statistics, and there's nothing that reports there's any kind of widespread belief, okay? But according to a report that was in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, they suggested that such events are extremely rare and the risk is very low. Now, the hospitals and some police stations would do what's called routine radiological screening, which means that they'll put the candy through and you'll see if there's pins or needles and everything. But the fear can be very powerful. I remember a friend told me that his sister-in-law used to secretly take all the candy that her children collected on Halloween. She would throw it out and replace it with new candy that she bought. So this is a common thing, and the problem is it seems to be in urban legends. On the other hand, there is one very real threat to children on Halloween, reported by the CDC. Does anyone want to take a shot at what that real threat is? 100%, young man over there. Children are 4 times more likely to be struck by a car on Halloween than any other night. Because obviously young, you're running across, you're doing whatever. I did that as a child when I went with my brothers, and you don't always pay attention. I was talking with someone, and I also said myself, I avoid as much as possible in the evening driving, going someplace, simply because even though it's a side street, I'll be careful. But even if you hit a main road in this area like Ford Road, Warren Road, you never know who sees his friend across the street and reason goes out the door and he goes and runs after him. I don't need that on my conscience. And I'm sure a lot of folks also feel that way. Now, a couple of things. Since this is Halloween presentation, I have a treat. I have 2 treats for all of you, so don't thank me yet. You first have to.
See the treat.
Oh. You first have to answer some trivia questions, though. And if you're good enough, I have 2 really cool Halloween optical illusions that I think you'll like. And feel free, I understand different folks have different comfort levels. Feel free to be vocal with an answer. This is audience participation, this part. How many pounds of candy corn are produced every year? Anyone want to guess? Any guess? 500 what? Oh.
3 billion.
It's around 35 million pounds. 35 million.
You're not giving that away, are you?
No, I'm not.
What's wrong with that?
Which Halloween candy is most popular with adults?
Snickers. Bud Light.
I would think Snickers. Who said Snickers? I would think Snickers. No, M&M's. M&M's the most popular candy with adults. Probably both.
It's not in the research?
I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you. Leave me your name and number. I'll get back to you. What popular candy was given to, there's some older folks here, maybe you would remember Korea. What popular candy was given to soldiers during the Korean War? It's something you really wouldn't think about because you would think Nestle bar. That was my first guess. Nestle. Tootsie Rolls. Oh. Tootsie Rolls was given to them. I don't know. I guess they were trying to win the soldier vote. I don't know what. And I know more than a few of you are going to get this one, and I won't like you for it, but I'll accept it. Which Halloween candy has been voted the worst of all time? No. Candy corn. I love candy corn. I don't know why people don't.
What do they do with those
Someone's, but somebody's buying it, obviously. And a close second place to candy corn is circus peanuts. Those little orange ones, I like those too. Look at this. He doesn't like candy corn. He doesn't, I don't know. I don't know if you're getting a treat, young man.
Again, depends on the treat.
Okay. And this is we have a few magicians here. You don't have to answer. You can if you want to. What famous magician died on Halloween? Harry Houdini. Very good. There's a very cool local connection. We're in Dearborn Heights, which is the Metro Detroit area. Where did he die? He died in Grace. Close. He died in Grace Hospital in Detroit, October 31st. October 31st. And October 31st is actually designated National Magic Day. It's not a congressional thing. They've tried to introduce it. Magicians, though, this is National Magic Week. This whole week is National Magic Week. And a lot of magicians will do volunteer things or nonprofit groups or give shows. And the cool thing about the Houdini dying in Grace Hospital is after his death, he died in room 401. There was a plaque that was placed on the door of his room designating it the Houdini room. So to honor him.
Did he die of natural causes?
He did die, yes, he died of natural causes. You've probably seen a lot of the movies, the Tony Curtis one where he's hanging upside down in the water, torture and spitting blood. That never happened. If you see him, he's under the ice and his mother is calling him. None of that happened. Those are all very clever kind of, movie tricks. I don't know what you want to call them. They are absolutely, he died of very natural means, in a very natural way. Okay, well, some of you were nice to me, but, I'm sorry, I said that out loud, did I? If you, would you mind passing, is that you're coming? This is a cool optical illusion. This is my gift to you, take it with you. And if you want, I have another one, and you can also, if you're passing out candy, I'm gonna put these maybe on the door. Now, I'm gonna caution you on this one, okay? This is an optical illusion of a cat, okay? This is an optical illusion of a cat. But once you see something about this cat's picture, you will not be able to unsee it, okay? You'll see what I'm saying. I don't want to hear. Jason, when you're through, you'll know what I mean when you see it. I'm sorry, I wish I could show this on the thing.
You mentioned about the trunk or treat. I wish they had it when I was a kid. It would cut down on walking.
Yes, it would. It would cut down on walking.
Or get hit by a car.
So, you'll see. Okay. Thank you, Jason. You're very kind. Why are you doing that? For those of you watching, the reason I say you can't unsee the cat is when you look at the cat, you will see his nose and the whole area. It's not a cat, it's another animal. Now, if you hold it more at a distance and you put it someplace, you may be able to unsee it, but once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. And you'll know, I'm sorry I can't demonstrate this on camera, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yes, yes. Okay. What it is, it's a mouse. It's a mouse in the center. And it's very, very hard, unless you seriously move it. Okay.
I see a giraffe.
Okay.
I see a resemblance.
Perhaps you should see an ophthalmologist, okay? You'll see it. But I do know if you taped it there, probably you will unsee it. So I just thought that was a cool thing. I hope you enjoy them, and if you have children, grandchildren, they can color it in, make copies, do whatever. It's a cool, for a party or something. Okay. Part 3, the psychology of Halloween. And Jason, how are we doing on time? Are we good? Okay. Jason, for those of you watching, is our fine librarian, so I talked to him and because I need to keep track of time. The psychology of Halloween costumes. Well, why are costumes worn on Halloween? That's a good question. The idea most likely originated from a Celtic festival on October 31st to mark the beginning of winter. Costumes were worn to ward off evil spirits. It was called Samhain in Ireland and Scotland, and the festival has pre-Christian roots. which means it's pagan. It has like a lot of things, Easter, Christmas, a lot of stuff that we now celebrate very happily was at one time a very, very different ritual. Now in 2024, in the order of popularity, children plan to dress up as Spider-Man, a ghost, a princess, a witch, and as their favorite superhero. Adult Halloween costumes, comparison. 2016, adults 18 to 34 chose Batman as their top choice. 2016, adults 35 and above chose the witch as their #1 costume. In 2024, interestingly enough, adults planned on dressing up as a witch, vampire, cat, Batman, and as a pirate. So apparently Batman character and witches consistently remain a fan favorite. My favorite Halloween pet costumes. Popular costumes for pet in 2024 included in order of popularity: a pumpkin, a hot dog, a bat, a ghost, and a bumblebee. My favorite costume I saw advertised for pets was a cat costume that you put on your dog. So you got the dog walking around like a cat. And Gen Z and millennials lead the pet costume craze. In 2024, 1 in 4, that's a lot, 25%, I think, is that 25%? They close enough. They dress up their animal companions, 1 in 4 people. There's a psychology behind children's costumes and adult costumes, surprisingly. Infants and children's costumes. In a study of infants through preschool, researchers found that younger children's costumes were considerably less gender-typed than the older children's costumes. Children whose parents chose their Halloween costume for them had Halloween costumes that were less gender-typed than did children who were involved in the Halloween costume decision-making process. Women's costumes. We talked before about the woman and the culture and how it influences them in movies. This is another great example of how culture influences women. Women's costumes and the way women are perceived depending on the identity they're expressing. Culture and human development play a role. In one study, women in revealing costumes were rated as less considerate, faithful, moral, self-respecting, and sincere, and were rated higher on femininity and sexualizing traits. And interestingly enough, both men and women sexualized women wearing the revealing costumes. So this is another example of the culture influencing how we perceive one gender over the other. Men's costumes, on the other hand. There was a study that suggested that corporations in selling male Halloween costumes are engaging in a ruse to deceive the wearer into believing that he's participating in a democratic ritual of identity construction, which is in reality simply another venue to generate corporate profit by branding masculinity. So also something to think about. We're going to talk a little bit more about men in costumes in a bit. Now, my favorite Halloween study of all, this is like an academic nerd's, Christmas. My favorite Halloween study of all time, this is it. Now, before I tell you what it is, understand this is in no way a political comment. So we live in a very polarized culture, as you may have noticed. This is not in any way meant to be political. But believe it or not, it was one in which zoo animals were tested to see if they could perceive the scary nature of Halloween masks. The researchers measured how willing an animal was to take food from a masked experimenter. In the experiment, humans rated Bill Clinton mask as not scary, while a vampire mask was rated as very scary. The results show that the animals apparently agreed. The conclusion is that human perception of scary faces does not necessarily depend on human-specific cultural factors like belief in the paranormal. Rather, it has a more biological basis shared with primates. So if an animal sees something that is scary coming after their food, possible looking at them as prey, how interesting they would react the same way we, as a human, seeing something scary, we get that same ooh reaction. Well, ironically, it's probably a very innate genetic reason we're reacting. Vampires. History of the vampire legend. Much like Halloween, the image of the vampire has changed throughout history. Images of vampires are universal, but they have their characteristics that change based on the culture and on the history. One idea from European legends of the vampire is that the vampire mythology may have allowed grief-stricken people to believe that they're in the continued existence of their loved one. Vampire mythology in the present day, it's very much changed. When I was a boy, it was Bela Lugosi, and Bela Lugosi meet Abbott and Costello, and on and on. It's a very different one we'll talk about. There's an emphasis in this new vampire mythology, especially in the media, on addressing females and their interests. We'll see in a moment. There's also a change from seeing the vampire as very fearful. Today he's become much more erotic. The change from fear to arousal, it has been suggested, may signal a change in sentiment that allows us to be more welcoming of outsiders. You had a question, you sir?
Did the vampire legend exist before Bram Stoker?
Yeah, he would have been way, because it would have been throughout history. I don't know when he wrote. When would he have written? 1800s? Yeah, no, it would have been around, I believe, before that, because it's a universal thing and it's changed and it's throughout history. So it would have been, I believe, much longer. Good question. Now, Twilight, a great example. Twilight. When I see a smile, I see Twilight fans. In the 2008 movie, it suggests that there's a cultural shift in the vampire legend. The movie appeals to women who find themselves identifying with the central character and with a lot of internal conflicts. The audience, it has been suggested, might vicariously experience a sort of idealized adolescence and love that's been denied to them in reality. In fact, one research study, believe it or not, there was a research study done on Twilight moms. They found that those who held traditional beliefs about women and who identified as non-feminist were more able to experience transportation into the books and experience dissatisfaction with their current romantic partners. Like all art, movies and books can mirror the culture as well as influence it. Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire and Twilight series have portrayed contemporary vampires as alluring, romantic, and compassionate, for example. And interestingly enough, somebody pointed out Interview with a Vampire, the Tom Cruise. So the great example of what a contrast between, a Bela Lugosi and a Tom Cruise. Now, the psychology of vampire cults, and I mentioned that, and I wasn't joking, vampire cults are very real. So what about it? Do they exist? Yes, they exist. And there's research that suggests that vampire cults may have emerged from the Gothic movement of the 1980s. There's a growing global vampire community over the past 2 decades. With the internet, it's easy for individuals to connect and form more structured groups. Groups like this appeal to adolescents largely, and it's possible for them to become involved in extreme behavior. They frequently and constantly test limits and rules in their search for their identity. Consequently, it's a more dangerous time for vampire-like behavior. So what would draw individuals to a vampire cult? Well, pretty much the same reason someone is drawn to other cults. They can come from a dysfunctional family life with very ineffective parents. They may have a history of abuse or neglect, low self-esteem and lack of close friends. Personality disorders in cult members can include things like antisocial and dependent personality disorders. Individuals who've recently moved, changed occupations, recently lost a romantic relationship, or are in a traditional life phase are at a higher risk. As well, individuals who find work trivial and education meaningless, have recently shunned religion, and who have an absent or inconsistent social life are at a higher risk for engaging in cult behavior like vampire cults. This is especially true of adolescents. Of course, now not everybody interested in vampires is a member of a cult or is at risk. I'm interested in vampires from a psychological perspective. Groups such as the Dracula Society are dedicated to the study of vampire literature, film, and theater. Some websites, though, are dedicated to self-professed vampires. Such websites act as a forum. Individuals can learn about such things as the different types of vampires and the best locations to make an incision for blood collection and consumption. And even though this is a Halloween lecture and it is geared toward adults, that's about as gory as I want to get. You can use your imagination on what someone looking to be a vampire is going to find online. However, there's good news about vampires in the economy. I came across an interesting article in, believe it or not, the Bulletin of the Transylvania University of Brasov from 2016. They suggested that there are more opportunities to develop the Dracula tourism in Romania by embracing the Dracula myth as a unique competitive advantage and as a tourist destination. And I can see a lot of people. That would be cool to visit. I wouldn't mind going to see that. Well, besides vampires, of course, what about werewolves? We don't want them feeling left out. And I'm not talking about werewolves of London. I'm talking about werewolves in general. What are werewolves? Where did they come from? It is called zoomorphism, is the belief that humans can transform themselves into animals. It's a widespread legend. The animal allegedly transformed into is usually common and feared, and may be an important symbol or religious figure. Since ancient Greece, the fear of transformation into a wolf-like animal has been recorded in European literature, and the Greeks worshiped the wolf. Werewolf comes from wer, W-E-R, from the Anglo-Saxon, and then ferment, so man-wolf. And werewolf legends also changed throughout history, also based on the culture. The belief that changing into an animal form can occur was called insania zoanthropica in the 18th century. The diagnosis of the delusion of transformation into a wolf-like animal is called lycanthropy. During the 15th and 16th century, mentally ill individuals were subjects for the interrogation by the Inquisition. During the late Middle Ages, theologians believed that physical metamorphosis was the result of a satanic pact or evil. People accused of being werewolves were brought before ecclesiastical courts. There was mass hysteria, and epidemics of lycanthropy were not uncommon. There was a French judge named Bourget who reportedly condemned 600 sufferers to death. Psychiatric look at werewolves. Well, in the 17th century, Robert Burton wrote a book called The Anatomy of Melancholy, which is a very famous book at that time, and he described it as a form of mental illness, and madness. Jung, the psychiatrist, believed the delusion was an expression of a primitive identity from which man struggles to free himself. Later case reports see the delusion as a nonspecific psychotic symptom. While having these symptoms, the person may see themselves as being very evil or very guilty. Review of cases of lycanthropy showed that the patients reported that they were a particular animal and behaved in a similar manner, were suffering most likely from depression, schizophrenia, or atypical psychosis. Atypical is one word, A meaning not typical psychosis. And interestingly enough, the transformation to animals doesn't just include wolves. In the psychiatric literature, I found that that transformation can also include transformation to a tiger, a rabbit, a dog, or a cat. So I wouldn't pick the cat, but you know. Okay. And finally, what would Halloween be without talking about witches? What is witchcraft? Who are the witches? Witchcraft focuses on the practice of magic and healing, and it implies a feminist political inclination to it. Witchcraft refers to a pagan religion that was inspired by pre-Christian European spiritual traditions. The focus of the religion is on deepening the relationship between the divine goddess and God and their manifestation through nature. Wicca, as we know it today, emerged from the 1940s in England and is the original form of modern pagan witchcraft. Wicca is the term preferred by many witches because it doesn't have a history of negative connotations. And a male witch, as I mentioned before, would frequently find himself extremely offended if he's called a warlock, and the reason is because the word warlock, the etymology of the word means oath breaker. So if you called somebody a warlock, that was not a good thing. It means you're breaking an oath, which means that you're a devious, unethical person. Imagine we go to court, we swear an oath to tell the truth. So if you broke that oath, that's a nasty thing to do. Well, if you called someone who was a male witch a warlock, that was considered very vulgar. Very interesting statistic I came across. There are 1.5 million potential practicing witches across the United States, which means that witchcraft potentially has more followers than the 1.4 million members of the Presbyterian Church. Most witches believe that working harmful magic will bring back harmful consequences to the sender. There's something called, I believe it's called the Law of Three, where they believe that when you send out something, and whatever you send out, good or bad, is going to come back to you times 3. It's very similar to other religions. Buddhists talk about karma returning. From a Christian point of view, what you sow, you reap, and that's very much a part of their thinking as well. So what might attract young individuals, especially to Wicca and witchcraft? Well, there's obviously a search for self, which is an important aspect of any religion. Young people might discover it through various forms of media, internet chat rooms, information sites, television and films, popular novels, and so forth. They might find their own internal belief systems and ideas are reflected in books that they read and philosophies that the books describe. The religion can provide people with a set of techniques to use to improve aspects of themselves. It can help young people to validate their emotions. People who are drawn to Wicca generally practice alone and through online forums, and there's actually something called solitary practitioner, which is someone who maybe is associated in some ways with a group, but they're mainly by themselves. So who are the pagans? Well, the pagan community is small, but it's growing. Paganism is an umbrella term that includes a variety of nature-based spiritual paths that typically honor the divine in both male and female form. There's no single group to which all pagans and witches belong. Demographic breakdown of pagans I thought was interesting. The large majority of pagans are white, and the majority of pagans are of European descent. Pagans have a higher level of formal education than the average American population. The median income is equivalent to the national average for the United States. Women are more likely to be drawn to paganism because of its emphasis on female images of the divine. What do pagans believe? Well, pagan spiritual paths generally don't require practitioners to subscribe to a particular set of beliefs. But some of the beliefs include nature is sacred. The divine is both male and female. Nature is composed of 4 spiritual elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The pentacle, which is a 5-pointed star in a circle, represents the 4 elements in addition to the all-encompassing spirit. Individuals can create change in their lives by practicing magic is also a belief, as well as many pagans practice divination, such as the use of tarot cards. Holidays celebrated can include summer and winter solstices, the spring and autumn equinoxes, and 4 holidays of Celtic origin. The new and full moons are considered times of ritual and celebration, and the rituals may include celebrations of life, baby blessing, youth's coming of age, and marriage. So in that thing, I find it interesting in that sense. They're no different than many, in that sense, they're no different than many traditional religions, baptized and marry and so on and so forth. Pagans and witches typically practice alone or in small groups, as I said, with no central organization. And many pagans and witches are afraid of disclosing their religion. They tend to mistrust conventional authority, and they may be concerned about harassment or discrimination. And that's a big part of trying to find statistics. So my guess is the statistics on witchcraft and so forth are really probably understated, because there's probably a lot more people who are practicing than they don't. And probably the most interesting thing that I found out about witches is the myths about the Salem witch trials. And these are things I was looking going, oh my, I believed that since I was a kid. So I can give you some of the myths. There's I got 4. There's 4 myths and the truth. Myth number 1, convicted witches were burned at the stake in the United States. False. Witchcraft was tried in court as a felony. Most of the accused were hanged, because they're going by English law. And in England, you hung them. Now in other countries, they would strangle them or hang them and burn them at the same, afterwards. But no, in America, none of them were burned. Myth number 2, only women were accused of witchcraft. Wrong. 75 to 80% of the individuals accused of witchcraft were women, 20 to 25% were men. One man named Giles Corey was crushed to death after he refused to be put on trial. And it was basically, I think, between 2 slabs of concrete, which is kind of interesting. These good Puritans had some really evil ways of destroying someone. I mean, these good religious Puritans, I'm seeing them going to church and they go, hey, let's go crush this guy. Myth number 3, the only witch trials were in Salem. Wrong. There were witch trials in Boston and surrounding communities. In fact, Connecticut had witch trials that spanned several decades. 11 people were hanged. Last one. The Salem witch trials lasted years and years. Also wrong. The trials began in the late summer of 1692, and they ended in early spring of 1693. 20 individuals were executed as witches. Nearly 300 individuals were accused. And considering the time and the hysteria and obviously the hatred and contempt, when you think about it, they were really exercising restraint. That 300 people were accused, and in that era, in that moment, that only 20 people were executed, were killed. Okay. I'm gonna sum up a little bit here what we talked about, and then if we have a little time, which we do, we can do some questions. Okay. But I was thinking about all of this and what does Halloween mean, and how has it changed, and so on and so forth, and kind of what could I say to summarize it? And it occurred to me that Halloween, there's a lot of things about Halloween that I find interesting. First of all, Halloween is second only to Christmas in money spent, and that's a huge thing. We spend a lot of money on Christmas, so to make Halloween, that's a pretty big thing. We talked about the history, we talked about vampires, talked about their costumes and their change. And I thought it was interesting, I was going back through my notes, I thought it was interesting that Batman and the Witch were the fan favorites between 8 years, and probably, I didn't go back further, but they probably did not have thought about that. Why might that be? What do they symbolize? Well, think about it. What does Batman symbolize? Batman symbolizes absolute right and wrong and truth. There's no shade of gray with Batman. The Joker and the Riddler, they're always wrong. They don't do anything right. So Batman as a character kind of symbolizes this sort of truth. It's like even Superman, what's the slogan from the TV show? Truth, justice, and the American way. So these represent a sort of life an idyllic life that all of us, who wouldn't love to live a life where everything is always the truth, and the good always fights evil, and the evil always loses. Even in the Batman TV show, I remember same bat time, same bat channel. He'd get in a predicament, but the next day, no matter how crazy, they were gonna drop him in boiling oil. No matter what, you knew the next day he was gonna be okay. So it was sort of a redemption of the human spirit, that no matter what happens, everything's gonna be okay. So I thought about that, and that might be a kind of attractive reason why superhero costumes are big, because who wouldn't mind being a superhero? The witch. Why would the witch be popular? Well, I think the witches are very mysterious. They can be very erotic. And again, as I mentioned about the horror movies, and I mentioned about the way people view women in the costumes, it is a very, very way for women to say, I don't need your permission to be who I am. I will be powerful. I am strong. I am independent. I don't need some patriarchal system giving me permission to do that. That's what a witch symbolizes. They are solitary. They are strong. They are sort of equal in terms of their mindset, in terms of what they want to do to men. So I think maybe that's the symbolism, where it's like you could be that character even for a little while. You may not be that character in everyday life because of a lot of cultural reasons, and I don't have to obviously tell all the young ladies here, because I know you've experienced being treated very differently because of who you are at some time in your life. Work, something I guarantee you has been treated. So I think that witch is sort of a liberated. I'm the ultimate liberated woman. I'm going to do what I want. Plus there's the mystery. They can cast spells, they can change things, they can do whatever. So I thought that was interesting. By that same token, I think vampires, I think werewolves, I think they're the unknown. I think we like scary things because they take us beyond the ordinary to another world that allows us to forget our challenges, even for a little bit. Shy people, the shy guy at work who can't speak up to his boss, he can become the Incredible Hulk, at least for a few hours. The plain, very shy young lady can be Marilyn Monroe and have guys, oh wow, look at that, and say that just for a little bit. She can see that part of herself that she so wishes she could experience, but doesn't have the courage to do so. And I think adults like it because it represents a simpler time in our lives. We didn't have adult responsibilities when we were isolated from the world of crime and war and poverty and hatred and all those things. I can remember as a child, going with my brothers. It was snowing and we were going. I don't care, we were going. Put on the coat, put on the costume, we were going. It's a simpler time for a child because that's all a child at that level is aware of. And I think a lot of that is an attempt to return sort of to the simplicity of what we had. I see millennials get a bad rap. I saw some people critiquing millennials say, well, they don't want to grow up. No, maybe they just looked and said, that was a really cool time, and unlike older generations, we want it to continue. We want it to continue, and it has. It's become a huge adult holiday to celebrate. It's not just for kids anymore. And finally, I think that Halloween, like Thanksgiving, like Christmas, like any other time, any other holiday that we get together, it's a time to connect with each other. You can eat, you can laugh, you have parties, you can enjoy each other's company. And you can be happy. Again, just for a little while, you can transcend the ordinary problems of our daily life and we can be transported for a moment to a happier past, to a place without worries, a place that we feel a lot more comfortable than we do now. So those are my kind of concluding thoughts on it. Does anybody, we got like five minutes, Jason? Okay. Does anyone have thoughts, comments, questions they'd like to share? And if I have to cut you off, I'm not being rude, but we do have to keep a time schedule, so don't be offended. Yes, sir.
Well, I'll just say it.
Go ahead.
Do you know why the pumpkin got associated with Halloween, other than the timing of the harvest? But why wasn't it a butternut squash or a spaghetti squash? You know?
I don't know offhand, but it wasn't always the pumpkin. Go ahead, young lady. You have a... No, go ahead. Do you know a little bit about the legend? It wasn't always a pumpkin. It was something else. And I think it had to do with somebody looking for truth, or he had a light. I forgot what. That's a good question. I'll include that in future presentations. No, that's a good question. And also, I'm sure the harvest, the idea of a harvest.
The timing, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's available, so let's use it. You know, it's like bobbing for apples. Hello, it's fall, you know. So,
Also the shape of a head too, so like the headless horseman. He had a
interesting. Headless horseman, okay. Anything else? Any other? Yes, sir.
What's your favorite Halloween costume?
My, you mean
It was the Speedo model.
besides the Speedo, besides the Speedo swimmer model? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't really have a favorite. I think if I had to be, it would be Batman. It would be Superman. It would be a superhero. And it's interesting too, because the psychiatrist Carl Jung talked about something called the shadow, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. The shadow is the unconscious part of us that is both negative and at the same time very positive. And you could make the case, a pretty good case, that if someone dresses up in a costume and you say, well, why are you doing that? And they say, I don't really know why. They really do, but it's unconscious. So let's say, again, let's say someone really thinks of themselves as outgoing, but that's a mask they wear. They may, wear, well, that's the way I am, but it's really not. It's your subconscious reminding you, you're really not that person, but okay, just for now, you can, it's okay. There are people, for example, I know more than a few people who have this really gruff and hideous exterior, and I can tell you, if you scratch that surface a little, you will find a little pussycat and a teddy bear. And a lot of people will put up a front like that because they've been hurt. It's a way to protect themselves. And I think a costume can act that same way, where you may be expressing yourself, like I say, the Hulk, great example, where even for that little bit of time, you can feel. And also the shadow side, I don't think is necessarily something evil or something necessarily unconscious. You may be very aware that you're shy and you're, whatever, and you wanna dress up. So a lot of that I think is both conscious and unconscious, but I think it's a superhero is who wouldn't want to be one? Why wouldn't I'd love to fly. I'd love to fly through the sky to go home and not take my little spark home. How wonderful that would be. So I think that's a big part of it. That's a big part. Anything else here?
What are the treats?
I gave you treats. I gave you 2 optical. You want another one? Oh, I have one just for you then. I'm glad you said that. You reminded me. Well, I don't have Bud Light. Here, okay, this is a good one. How many of you are familiar with an artist, a graphic artist called Escher? His last name is Escher. This is a really cool optical illusion. It had nothing to do with Halloween, but I thought you'd like this. This is something that on paper looks deceptively easy to build. You could never construct this. And if we have engineers, and I'm sure we got a few technical, you cannot construct this in real life. Keep staring at it and looking at it. It's fun. And thank you for reminding me of this, sir. Keep looking at it, and you will find it the most bizarre optical illusion you've ever seen. Escher, this was created for it's the first impossible cube. It's part of his Belvedere artwork. And he has a whole bunch of illusions. If you look him up online, you will find it very intriguing, because the minute you think you've got it figured out, you're like, no, wait a minute. There's another line. How am I going to build this? So you'll find it very interesting. So, and again, I wish people seeing this could see the optical illusions, but I'm sorry you can't. But any final thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned it was a myth that there were massive hangings of witches
Massive burnings.
Massive burnings. Did you come across any research about the process, if it was a myth about the process of fighting witches, for instance, things like the dunking chair?
Yeah, so it's a good, I did come across that. So far as I know, the idea of the dunking chair in America, it may have been used in other countries. That was a myth. They didn't really do that in America. I also thought it was funny, because I'm kind of logical sometimes. I found it interesting that one way they were saying, a witch, if to prove someone isn't a witch, is if they can recite the Lord's Prayer. Well, here's the thought. If I am an evil entity possessing you, it's going to be real easy for me to say a prayer. So it's like, I don't know why that was considered a big test. I mean, so if you were really, really an evil person, in quotes, there would be no reason why you couldn't do that. So. That was a test they used to recite the Lord's Prayer. And there's a lot more, which obviously time constraints go, but a lot of what was happening was people who were recent immigrants, people who were different races, people who didn't fit in, were very much part of the people who were accused of being witches. In fact, there was even some things I've seen suggesting that when the colony wanted someone's land, they would accuse them of being a witch, because then they could take public domain over their property. It's interesting because, and I think that's interesting. It's like the devil's night into vandalism. We think of a lot of this stuff. We see the news and, oh, look at this and how evil and how terrible America's gotten. This stuff was going on way before. And they had no, in fact, they were even a lot, in my opinion, they were a lot more vulgar. I mean, you're crushing someone to death with bricks because you think because he refuses. He wasn't even convicted. He just refused to go to trial. And it's like, that's really bad. So I think it's interesting how I think we tend to romanticize the past only because we haven't lived through it, and we look at the good things. We don't realize that there's a whole bunch of good, there's a whole bunch of bad. I would not want to live. My dad was born in the 1900s and would tell me stories about polio. He told me about kids with braces up and down the street. I've never seen a child with polio in my lifetime because we have ways to combat it. So when people romanticize, those were the good old days. Talked about the Depression. He was on WPA. He was on a lot of stuff. We didn't have the resources, so people can pick and choose and romanticize. That was a good time, but you can't select. You have to take the good with the bad. So I find it very interesting that was what a lot of them were doing. They were basically looking, I think, for scapegoats in lots of ways for the trials. So any else questions? No? Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, found it interesting.